Chapter 1, The Party. The night started like every other company party, overpriced hors d'oeuvres, awkward jazz covers, and people pretending they weren't checking Slack under the table. Claire stood out the moment we walked in. Not just because she looked incredible, although she did, but because she didn't try to impress anyone. She was confident, curious, quick with her smile. She asked questions like she actually wanted to know the answers. And for a company full of people who talked mostly about themselves, that made her magnetic. Everyone noticed. Including Nigel. He didn't come over at first. Just watched from across the rooftop, swirling his whiskey like he was too important to engage with anyone outside his chosen circle. But by the time Claire was on her second drink, he drifted our way. "Evan," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You didn't tell me your fiancé was the real star of the team." I smiled. Claire smiled. But something about the way he looked at her made my spine itch. He turned to her. "Claire, right? You work in architecture?" She nodded. "Interior design. Mostly commercial spaces these days." Nigel's smile widened, the exact kind he used in investor meetings when he smelled money. "Ah, that explains the posture. Creative and sharp. Dangerous combination." Claire laughed politely. I felt her hand tighten slightly around mine. Nigel didn't notice. Or maybe he did. He kept talking. Kept asking questions. Claire answered, gracious as always. But every so often, his eyes lingered just a second too long. Like he was cataloging her. Like he was imagining something. Later that night, as we walked to the car, Claire slipped off her heels and exhaled. "Your boss is intense." I laughed. "That's the generous version." She paused. "He kept calling me elegant. Like, 3 times. I looked over. "He did?" She nodded. "And he asked if we were really getting married in the fall. Like he was testing it." I frowned. "That's weird." "Yeah," she said quietly. "It was." We didn't talk about it again that night. We ordered Thai, watched half a movie, and fell asleep on the couch like nothing had happened. But 2 days later, when my name went missing from the top of a shared deck I'd spent 3 weeks building, and Nigel told me it was probably just a formatting error, I felt something shift. Something small. But sharp. Chapter 2, Offhand, Revised. I didn't say anything the first time. When my name vanished from the project deck, I assumed it was a formatting error. That's what Nigel called it, anyway. "Probably just a versioning issue," he said, breezy as ever. "Happens when there's too many cooks in the dock." He flashed a grin. That polished, easy smile he gave when he wanted you to know he was too important to worry about details. "We all know it was your work, Evan. Don't sweat the credits." I told myself not to. Really, I did. But 2 days later, I was sitting in a review session when another slide came up, one I'd written line by line, from the campaign hook to the data-backed insight. And once again, no mention of me. Nigel presented it like he'd built it himself. Flipped through the structure I'd crafted, told a story I'd spent hours refining. I waited for the handoff, the nod, even just a glance in my direction. Nothing. When the call ended, I stared at the screen for a while. Then I opened the document history. My comments were there. My name. My markup. Then, a final edit at 12:46 a.m. the night before the meeting, from Nigel's account. That version had no attribution tags at all. I mentioned it to him later, quietly, like I was trying not to make a big deal out of it. He just shrugged. "You know how it is. Too many names muddies the message." Then he asked how Claire was. Just like that. Total pivot. "She's good," I said, not sure where the conversation was going. Nigel leaned against the counter, hands in his pockets, and gave me this look, the kind that made you feel like he was sizing you up for something you didn't know you were auditioning for. She's got presence, he said. That rare mix, elegance without pretense. Most people either try too hard or disappear. She doesn't. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. You're lucky, he added. Some guys marry for comfort. You? You're marrying for power. There was a pause. A long one. Then he smiled again, as if what he'd just said was perfectly normal. I nodded, said something bland about being grateful, and walked back to my desk. But the moment stuck. That tone. The way he said it. Like Claire wasn't a person to him, just a prize. A rung on a ladder. A variable in an equation he was already solving for. And suddenly, I couldn't stop hearing her voice from the night of the party. He asked if we were really getting married in the fall. At the time, it felt weird. Now it felt like a test. Chapter 3, Ghost Credits. I didn't expect to be thanked in front of the whole team. But I didn't expect to be erased, either. We were in the middle of the monthly department meeting, a standing room only kind of call where Nigel loved to perform, to show off strategy wins and bask in applause for decisions he hadn't made alone. This month's highlight? The internal brand refresh I'd spent 6 weeks building. I watched from my desk as the keynote played, slide after slide, language I had written, visuals I had helped shape, metrics I'd pulled with my own queries. Nigel stood at the front of the room, narrating every step like it was his own blueprint. Not once did he say my name. Not once. At first, I thought maybe he'd mention me at the end. A closing shout out. A quick, and props to Evan for shepherding this through. But the deck ended. People clapped. Someone whistled. And Nigel just smiled. Great work, team, he said. This is what happens when we stay focused and hungry. I didn't even have time to stand up before people started filing out, talking about weekend plans and code freeze deadlines like none of it mattered. Later that afternoon, I pulled up the doc history again, not because I needed proof, but because I needed to see if I was losing it. I wasn't. Every timestamp aligned. Every comment traceable. My name was in the metadata, baked into every iteration of the deck. Until the final upload. I found the edit, buried in the asset library. Last saved by Nigel. One version only. I sat there in silence for a long time. Not angry. Not yet. Just stunned. And then, as if on cue, a message popped up in Slack. From Nigel? Hope you're not feeling sidelined today, the work spoke for itself. Don't worry, the right people know where it came from. The right people. That phrase echoed in my head like a warning. Because it didn't mean credit. It meant control. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was being pulled out of my own story, one version edit at a time. Chapter 4, The Complaint. The email came in on a Thursday afternoon, just before I shut my laptop for the night. No subject line. No explanation. Just a calendar invite, check in with Priya, 15 minutes. HR. My stomach tightened before I even clicked it. The invite had been forwarded by Nigel's assistant. No message. No context. I stared at it for a few seconds, rereading the time like it might change. Claire was across the room, balancing a shoe in one hand and a jacket in the other. We had dinner plans. I'd already promised I wouldn't check my phone while we were out. But she saw my face before I said a word. What's wrong? She asked, pausing in the hallway. I turned the screen toward her. HR wants to talk. Her brow furrowed. About what? I shrugged, too fast. No clue. Just says check in. She didn't say anything right away. Just stood there, one shoe on, eyes narrowing slightly like she was trying to solve something she didn't have all the pieces to yet. You think it's real? She asked. Like, routine? Could be, I said, trying to sound casual. Pulse check, Maybe? Or a project thing. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The call was the next day. Priya logged on first, already smiling, the kind of polished HR smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Hi Evan," she said warmly. "Thanks for making time. Shouldn't take long." "Of course," I said, sitting up straighter. "Everything okay?" She gave me a small nod, glancing down at her notes, visible enough to let me know she was working from a script. "There've been some informal concerns raised," she began, "around communication patterns. A few mentions of tone, reactivity, interpersonal dynamics." Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. Like she was trying not to wake something. I blinked. "From who?" "I can't disclose that," she said smoothly. "But it was flagged at the leadership level." There it was. Leadership. Nigel. I kept my face still, though my fingers tensed slightly against the edge of the desk. She continued. "Nothing formal. No investigation. Just an opportunity to calibrate expectations. See where support might be helpful." Calibrate. The word stuck like gum to the inside of my skull. I leaned forward slightly. "Are there specific examples I can speak to? I'd like to address anything directly." Priya smiled again, sympathetic, practiced. "This isn't disciplinary. Think of it as proactive support." Support. That was what they called it when someone was getting quietly edged out. The call ended with polite pleasantries. I thanked her for the feedback. She thanked me for being open. We both pretended it meant nothing. Then I sat in the silence of my home office and listened to the faint tick of the wall clock, the sound of life continuing outside the frame of that conversation. 15 minutes passed before I moved. When I finally emerged, Claire was on the couch, flipping through her phone, a mug of something warm already waiting on the table beside my seat. I sat down. She didn't ask right away. Just waited. After a moment, I said it. "Do you think he's trying to push me out?" Claire didn't speak immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. Measured. "I think he wants something he can't have," she said. "And he's trying to make you the problem instead of himself." I didn't argue. She leaned forward, picked up a small leather-bound notebook from the coffee table, and held it out. "What's this?" "Your backup," she said. "Start writing everything down. Don't keep it on your work laptop. And don't trust version control." That was the moment it stopped being a coincidence. That night, I backed up every message. Saved every calendar ping. Exported metadata and mirrored my entire drive. Because I wasn't just being paranoid anymore. I was being erased, and if I didn't move fast, I wouldn't even have proof that I'd ever existed. Chapter 5, The DM. We were brushing our teeth when Claire said it. I didn't want to say anything before, but he messaged me. I turned toward her, slowly. "Nigel?" She met my eyes in the mirror and nodded, quiet. It was after that rooftop party. Maybe 2 days later. It showed up in my Instagram DMs. I thought it was weird. I still do. I set down my toothbrush. "What did he say?" Claire rinsed her mouth and leaned on the counter. "He said he'd been thinking about our conversation. That I had an elegant presence. And he hoped I hadn't felt too crowded by the energy that night." I stared at her. "He sent that out of nowhere?" "He called it a follow-up," she said. "Like we had some kind of unfinished thread. Then he said something about noticing real potential in people, personally and professionally." I felt a slow heat rise in my chest. "Did you reply?" "No." She didn't even hesitate. I deleted it. Didn't want to fan the flame. I figured it was just posturing. "Did he ever message again?" Claire hesitated, just for a second. "He liked a few of my photos. Scrolled way back. Nothing else." Jesus. I pushed off the wall, started pacing across the room. The dots were connecting too clearly now, his tone, the sudden undermining at work, that calibration meeting. Nigel wasn't acting out of insecurity. He was strategizing. And he asked if we were really getting married, I said aloud, the memory snapping into sharper focus. He wanted to know if it was serious. Claire nodded. Yeah. That line rattled me too. I looked at her. Why didn't you tell me earlier? She exhaled. Because I didn't want to add pressure. I thought maybe I'd misread it. That I was being paranoid. My voice dropped. You weren't. She stepped toward me, her voice low and certain. Evan, I don't think this is the first time he's done this. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Something about the way he acted. It felt practiced. Like he knew how far to push. How to test for a reaction without leaving a footprint. We stood in silence for a beat. Then Claire added, whatever he's doing, it's not new. He's done it before. And you're just the latest version of the story. Chapter 6, A Look Back. The name came from a comment thread. I was up late one night, sitting in the dim glow of my laptop, spiraling through forums for people burned by corporate sabotage, not exactly my usual reading material. But after everything Claire told me, I couldn't sleep. I needed to know if someone else had seen Nigel's pattern. That's when I saw it. A thread titled When Your Boss Gets Personal, and You Can't Prove It. Buried inside was a story. Vague. No company names. Just fragments. He started with small slights, edits that erased me, meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Then he got friendly with my girlfriend. Said he could mentor her. Offered to review her portfolio. I left quietly. Everyone thought I was unstable. That's what he wanted. The post was signed off with just a first name, Maya. I sat up straighter, heart thudding. I ran a reverse search through LinkedIn, cross-referencing Maya with Nigel's old employer. Only 2 came up with shared history. One was in finance. The other? A UX lead. Smart. Articulate. Her profile said she left the company 3 years ago to rebuild. I sent a message. Didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later, she responded. You're not the first person to ask me about Nigel. That should tell you something. We set up a call. Maya didn't waste time with pleasantries. Let me guess, she said. Your fiancé caught his attention. Now your job's evaporating by the week? Pretty much. She let out a soft laugh, bitter and familiar. Yeah. Been there. What did he do to you? Started subtle. Took credit for things. Changed my slide decks. Told people I was struggling with bandwidth. She paused. Then he offered to mentor my girlfriend. Invited her to a design panel he was hosting. Started emailing her directly. I didn't even know until she showed me the messages. I was quiet. The room felt colder than it had a minute ago. Maya continued, the worst part wasn't what he did. It was how no one believed me. Everyone thought I was exaggerating. Emotional. Unstable. She made air quotes with her fingers. I left before it turned into a formal write-up. He didn't even have to push. Just let the damage speak for itself. I leaned forward. Do you have anything? Emails, messages, documentation? I kept some things, she said. But I didn't fight it back then. I should have. I thought walking away was the cleanest option. I nodded, already feeling the burn of recognition. He's doing the same thing to me. Maya exhaled. Then you better do what I didn't. Document everything. And don't wait for someone else to step in. He counts on that. When we ended the call, I sat staring at my screen, heart still pounding. Maya hadn't just confirmed what I feared. She'd handed me the start of a paper trail, a pattern. A playbook. And now that I knew the game, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to find a way to win it. Chapter 7, The Audit. It started with a folder no one was supposed to look twice at. It lived deep in the shared drive under a string of auto-generated labels, the kind of naming convention only IT or a desperate strategist would ever bother digging through. But that night, I was both. The pitch had gone well. Too well. Nigel had presented it with his usual flair, brushing past strategy slides like they'd emerged from thin air. And the internal postmortem was already being framed as one of his cleanest wins of the quarter. Except, something didn't add up. The brand language he'd used, the theme of functional transparency, wasn't just familiar. It was mine. Every sentence had been lifted directly from the doc I'd sent him 3 nights earlier. I'd spent hours massaging the phrasing, refining the positioning for the client's notoriously skeptical C-suite. And now it was being showcased like a spontaneous brainchild from Nigel himself. I pulled up the shared deck. On the surface, it was clean. No track changes, no comments, just a finalized PDF uploaded from his account. But something made me dig deeper. I checked the file's edit history, not through Google Docs, but through the SharePoint backend. It was a long shot, but sometimes metadata survives negligence. This time, it did. Inside the campaigns _Q2 folder, tucked under a subfolder labeled miscellaneous drafts, I found it. The original deck. Unlocked. With version history still intact. I clicked through, watching it rebuild itself layer by layer. There was my phrasing. There were my comments. And there, clear as day, was the time-stamped moment Nigel deleted the line at the bottom of slide 3. Strategy, Evan Marks. Not commented out. Not replaced. Just gone. Like it had never existed. I sat there, jaw clenched, heartbeat loud in my ears. This wasn't just oversight. This was a pattern. Intentional. Precise. A surgical erasure that left just enough behind to cover his tracks, unless someone knew where to look. I took screenshots. Saved local copies. Exported version logs with embedded timestamps. Claire helped me organize it all into a mirrored archive that night. Clean folder structure. Secure drive. Offline backup. It felt like building a bunker. At first, I told myself it was insurance. Documentation. Something to bring to HR if things escalated. But then the message came from Jonah. He was the project manager on the client side, sharp, perceptive, someone I'd collaborated with during a pilot campaign last year. I hadn't been on the client call this time. Nigel had said the team was streamlined for efficiency. But that morning, Jonah pinged me on Slack. "Hey man, great work on the campaign. Nigel said you spearheaded the strategy. Good to see you behind it again." I blinked at the screen. "He said that?" I typed back, cautious. "Yeah, said you ran point, just weren't on the call 'cause you were stacked. Either way, solid stuff." I stared at the message for a full minute. So Nigel had claimed me in private to the client, because he knew he needed my credibility, while simultaneously cutting me out of visibility internally. He was building himself up using my ideas while positioning me as an unreliable, overextended shadow. He didn't want me fired. Not yet. He wanted me invisible. Until he didn't need me anymore. That realization hit harder than I expected. I showed Claire the thread that night. She read it twice, lips pressed together in that way she did when she was working through something she couldn't quite say. Then she looked up and said, "He's not just trying to erase you, Evan. He's trying to split you in half." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He wants you credible enough to be useful. But unstable enough to be replaceable." I leaned back in my chair. That was it. That was the strategy. Credit in the shadows. Discredit in the light. "You realize," Claire added, "you've already started fighting back. You just haven't aimed yet." She was right. I had receipts. Versions. Eyewitnesses. Patterns. I didn't need to wonder if something was happening anymore. Now, I just needed a way to bring the right eyes to it. And to make sure that when the story came out, it wouldn't just be his version they heard. Chapter 8, Neutralize. It was Claire who said the word first. Attorney. I had just finished showing her the full documentation trail, the version histories, the Slack threads, the call logs. We were sitting on the couch, laptop open between us, lit only by the screen and the steady pulse of the streetlight through the window. I don't want to sue him, I said. You might not have to, she replied. But you need someone who understands how this works. Someone who sees through the gaslight before it's burning. She was right, again. But I still hesitated. I wasn't afraid of lawyers. I was afraid of how it would look. I'd spent years building a reputation as calm, steady, rational. Not litigious. Not reactive. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated dismantling. And the only thing worse than being the guy who cried sabotage, was being the guy who stayed quiet and got buried. So I reached out to a former colleague, someone I'd worked with back when I was freelancing, Camille James, now in-house counsel at a tech firm 2 cities over. Smart. Tactical. Discretion was her specialty. We met for coffee on neutral ground, a nondescript cafe on a side street near her office. I laid it out slowly, carefully. The campaign theft. The version deletions. The Slack messages. The HR calibration. Claire's story. Maya's. Camille listened, barely interrupting. Just nodded, occasionally taking a note in a little flipbook she kept tucked behind her phone. When I was done, she tapped her pen against the paper once, then looked up. This is coordinated, she said. Deliberate and strategic. And if you keep waiting, you're going to find yourself cornered with no credibility left. I swallowed. So what do I do? First, she said, you stop thinking like an employee. Start thinking like a case. She outlined the basics. Documentation I already had. Dates to lock down. Instances where third-party attribution could support my claims, emails from clients, team messages, metadata logs. But the most important piece? I need you to talk to someone inside, she said. Not just Claire. Someone at the company. Someone who's seen what's happening but hasn't said anything yet. Like who? Camille's eye sharpened. You know who. You just haven't asked yet. And I did. The name was already in my mind before she finished the sentence. Devin. Quiet, capable. A mid-level analyst who'd worked on every strategy deck I'd ever built, and who'd stopped making eye contact with me 2 weeks ago. If anyone had seen Nigel's version control in real time, it was him. But the question wasn't whether Devin knew. It was whether he'd be willing to talk before it was too late. Chapter 9, Devin's Line. I waited until nearly everyone had cleared out for the day. It was past 6 when I saw Devin still at his desk, earbuds in, tapping out something in Excel with that deep focus look he always had when he was trying not to hear the noise around him. I didn't approach right away. I watched him for a minute, wondering how much he already knew. Wondering if this conversation would flip a switch. Or just confirm that the whole office had already picked a side. Eventually, I stepped in front of his desk. He looked up, startled. Pulled one earbud out. Hey, I said quietly. Can I borrow 5 minutes? Devin glanced around. The place was mostly empty now, except for 2 engineers at the back and someone rustling through the snack drawer. Yeah, he said after a second. Yeah, sure. We walked to one of the unused glass conference rooms. I didn't sit. Neither did he. I kept it simple. Honest. I think you've seen what's been happening, I said. The version changes. The credit shifting. The stuff that disappears after hours. Devin's face didn't change. But he didn't deny it either. I'm not trying to drag you into something, I said. But I need to know, am I crazy? Or is this real? That's when he finally spoke. You're not crazy, he said, voice low. I've seen it. The air left my lungs like a slow exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. Devon looked at the floor. I didn't know what to do. He's careful. Everything feels like a shrug or a miscommunication. But yeah. I've seen your name stripped off documents. Seen him edit things after you log off. And there was that one time. He stopped himself. I stepped closer. What time? He hesitated. Then, the Q1 deck? The sustainability strategy piece. He had me stay late to reformat it. Told me not to touch the structure, just change fonts and spacing. But when I opened the file, your version was right there, in the history. All of it. I nodded slowly. Did you save it? I asked. He looked up. I made a PDF. I didn't even know why at the time. Just felt wrong. You still have it? He nodded. Yeah. It's on my personal drive. That drive, that file, could be the tipping point. A third-party witness. A version saved outside the company system. Something Nigel couldn't quietly disappear. Devon, I said carefully, I'm not asking you to take sides. But if this keeps going, I could lose my job. And he won't stop. Not until he burns through everyone. Devon looked at me for a long second. Then he said, I'll send it tonight. That was the moment I knew, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The silence was breaking. The story was starting to shift. And Nigel? He had no idea it was already unraveling from the inside. Chapter 10, The Whistle. The PDF from Devon landed in my inbox at 9:03 p.m. It wasn't just a backup. It was a time capsule, a time-stamped copy of the Q1 deck, with metadata that placed its creation firmly before Nigel's final version. My phrasing. My formatting. My entire strategy flow, untouched. At the bottom of one slide. Draft reviewed by Evan Marks, March 12, 11:48 p.m. And right there in the file properties. Last saved by Devon Elkins. I stared at the screen for a long time, the silence in our apartment thick with the kind of tension that comes before a strike. Claire stood behind me, arms crossed, watching. You have him, she said. In his own game. Almost, I replied. Because one file wasn't enough. I needed leverage. I needed context. And, if I was going to survive this, I needed someone inside HR who would actually listen. Not Priya. Elena Cross. The VP of People Ops. Quiet. Calculated. A level above the political games Nigel liked to play. She didn't do friendly coffee chats or emoji-laced check-ins. She operated in tone, timing, and silence. But she also had one reputation that mattered more than anything: she hated cover-ups. I'd only spoken to her directly twice. Both times during leadership trainings. Both times, she remembered exactly who I was. So I sent her a message. Short. Specific. Clocked at 9:47 p.m. Elena, I know you don't get involved in every dispute. But I'm requesting a confidential discussion about escalating retaliation that may involve data manipulation and interference with client deliverables. This is bigger than personality friction. I have documentation. Please advise how to proceed. It took exactly 12 minutes. Her reply. Come by my office. Tomorrow. 7:30 a.m. before anyone else arrives. Claire was still standing behind me when I read it. She placed her hand on my shoulder. You okay? No, I admitted. But this is the first time I felt like I might be. The next morning, I walked into the office before the lights even fully flickered on. No coffee. No headphones. Just a folder under my arm and a line drawn in the sand. Elena's office was on the top floor, the only one with real glass, not a film overlay. She opened the door herself. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask why I'd reached out. She just nodded at the chair. Show me. I sat down and opened the folder. By the time I finished, she hadn't said a single word. But her posture had shifted. She was no longer leaning back, she was forward, focused. Her fingers steepled, brows drawn. I'm going to ask you something blunt, she said. Go ahead. Are you planning to sue? I met her eyes. Not unless I have to. But I'm not going down quietly. Elena nodded once. Understood. Then she tapped the PDF twice with her pen and said something that changed everything. You're not the only one who's come to me about him. But you're the first who brought receipts. Chapter 11, The Ice Cracks. Nigel didn't speak to me all day. Which wouldn't have meant much. If it weren't for the way he looked at me when I passed him in the hallway around noon. The glance was sharp. Fleeting. But unmistakable. He knew. I didn't say anything. Just nodded, professional. Neutral. But something had changed. His grip on the wheel wasn't as steady anymore. By mid-afternoon, whispers were starting. Not loud. Not accusatory. But curious. People asking about meeting ownership. Wondering why timelines had shifted on shared decks. A subtle rewiring of attention. I didn't feed it. That wasn't my job. But I did stay late, and so did he. I saw his office light on around 7:15, the door cracked just enough for a sliver of tension to bleed into the hallway. His laptop was open. A call in progress. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end, but the tone was urgent. Defensive. I kept walking. The real shift came the next morning. An urgent calendar invite from Elena Cross. Leadership alignment check-in, 8:30 a.m. Nigel was listed as optional. I was not. I arrived 2 minutes early. Elena's office was closed, but her assistant opened it the second I appeared. Elena looked up from her tablet, gestured to the seat opposite her. Thanks for coming. I sat. She didn't waste time. Your documentation checks out? I had it reviewed. I nodded. Thank you. I'm not thanking you, she said, calmly. I'm acknowledging it. She turned the tablet toward me. On the screen was a clean layout of version history logs, formatted, time-stamped, color-coded. My metadata, Devon's file, and a summary memo she'd drafted herself. This will be escalated, she said. Quietly, for now. But formally. I nodded again, slower this time. What does that mean for me? It means you're going to be very, very careful. She tapped the screen again, flipped to a second page. If you want a future here, you'll avoid the temptation to burn it down. Let the process work. I understand. Do you? Her voice sharpened, just slightly. Because Nigel won't go quietly. He'll pivot. He'll gather allies. He'll find other ways to destabilize you. You've drawn blood. Expect retaliation. I swallowed hard. What should I do? Stay visible. Stay clean. And if anything changes, anything, I want it documented immediately. I nodded. Then she said something I didn't expect. He's done this before. But never to someone who fought back this cleanly. I met her eyes. So I'm not the first? No, she said simply. But you might be the last. When I left her office, Nigel was standing 10 feet down the hall, arms folded. He didn't smile. Didn't nod. He just watched me walk past like I'd stepped onto a stage he thought he owned. And I knew right then, he was going to try something. The only question now was what? Chapter 12, The Slip. It happened in a meeting he didn't know I was invited to. A cross-functional review on Q3 projections. Normally, strategy wouldn't even be in the room yet. But Elena had started looping me into everything tied to Nigel's vertical. Quietly. Deliberately. No explanation, no announcement. I walked in 2 minutes early. Nigel was already there, standing at the head of the conference table, sleeves rolled up, posture easy. Performative casual. He was telling a story to a group of junior team leads, something about vision mapping and executive intuition. When he saw me, the story stuttered. His eyes narrowed. He gave a tight, delayed nod. I nodded back and took a seat at the far end of the table. The meeting began, and for the first 20 minutes, it was harmless. Forecasts. Budget slides. Timeline considerations. But then something shifted. Nigel brought up a slide labeled Conceptual Pathways. And I recognized it immediately. It was mine. My structure. My phrasing. My flow. He'd stripped out the branding, rebuilt the color scheme, but the architecture hadn't changed. Not even the subheaders. Intuitive milestones. Fractal messaging. Phrases I'd coined and used exactly once, in a confidential brainstorming file I never shared with him. Except I had. Indirectly. Through a folder his assistant had access to when we worked on a joint proposal 2 months ago. And now. Here it was. I raised my hand. Nigel hesitated. Yes, Evan? Just curious, I said, keeping my tone even. Where did this framework originate? He blinked. Pardon? This slide, I gestured. The structure. The phrasing. Is it from one of our internal decks? I don't see a source citation. His jaw tightened, barely, but it was there. I compiled this version myself, he said coolly. So the original wasn't pulled from any of the shared drafts we submitted during the Atlas review process? Silence. The room was quiet. Not frozen. Not stunned. Just aware. People were watching now. The story was slipping. I'm just asking because I have a copy of this format, timestamped before the Atlas deck even reached design, I said. And it looks identical. Word for word. Nigel gave a slow, practiced smile. We all borrow from each other now and then, don't we? But no one laughed. The slide hung behind him like an accusation. I didn't press further. Didn't have to. The air had already changed. The junior team leads, once so eager to nod along, now shifted in their seats. 2 of them glanced at each other. Someone reached for their phone. The call ended on time. No flare-ups. No yelling. Just a slow descent into unease. But I stayed behind. Nigel waited until the last person left, then turned to me. What's your angle? He asked, voice low. No angle, I said. Just a record. He stepped closer. You think Elena's going to save you? I don't need saving. He leaned in. You're playing a dangerous game. No, I said. You are. I'm just recording the score. For the first time, he looked unsure. Not defeated. Not rattled. But he knew, the grip was slipping. And this time, it wasn't going back. Chapter 13, The Reckoning, final version, now with fire. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. But the shouting started at 3:46. I was sitting at my desk, finalizing notes for the pitch transition plan, the one Elena had quietly handed me, when I heard the muffled thud of something slamming against a wall. A door. Then voices. Then his voice. I built this team. Chairs scraped. Heads turned. I stood and moved to the corner of the floor, just far enough to catch the scene unfolding through the glass hallway outside Elena's office. Nigel was standing in front of her desk, red-faced, arms flailing. His voice punched through the walls, no longer polished, feral. You're gonna hang me for what, Elena? A few edits? Everyone borrows, everyone tweaks, this is politics, not plagiarism. Elena stood behind her desk, still as stone. 2 security guards were flanking the door, not touching him. Yet. We gave you a chance to step down quietly, she said, her voice low but somehow cutting through everything. You declined. Oh, you loved what I delivered. Until the little strategist got in your ear with his sad boy screenshots. He turned, almost sensing me. His eyes scanned the hall. And landed on me. A beat of dead silence. Then he laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound, the kind that doesn't land, just ricochets off glass. Oh, of course, he spat. Evan. You really think this makes you the hero? You're just a footnote in my legacy. You got lucky because I underestimated you. I didn't flinch. Didn't move. Just held his gaze. Elena stepped forward. This isn't a negotiation, Nigel. Your access has been revoked. Your exit paperwork is complete. Security will escort you out now. No, he said, voice rising again. I'm not going out like some goddamn pariah. I made this place win. I carried this company for 5 years while you sat upstairs pretending your little HR systems made any difference. He pointed at me again, wild now. And he's nothing. A B-tier analyst with a file folder and a fiancée who wouldn't even look at him if she knew what he really was. Security stepped in. But Elena raised a hand. And she looked at him like he was already gone. You always thought people were beneath you, she said. But you never realized the ones you step on remember everything. Then she turned to the guards. Walk him out. As they moved in, Nigel's last words weren't shouted, they were hissed. This place will rot without me. And then the elevator doors closed behind him. The meeting still happened. Elena stood in front of the full team and laid it out, not in PR speak, not in euphemisms. She called it manipulation. She called it theft. And she called it over. Then she turned to me and said, in front of everyone, Evan Marks will assume lead strategy for our Q4 initiatives effective immediately. The room didn't erupt. It went quiet. The kind of quiet where you realize everyone just witnessed the end of an era, and the start of something else. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. I felt seen. Epilogue, off the record, final version with restraining order 3 weeks later, the article dropped. Not from our comms team. Not from a vague internal shake-up memo. From Business Cipher, a mid-tier but widely read tech newsletter known for its Savage Monday exposés. Fall from strategy, how one exec's ego became a liability. The story didn't name sources. But it didn't have to. The timeline was airtight. The claims specific. The headline ruthless. Quotes from unnamed staff. A former client noting inconsistencies in deliverables. A paragraph detailing the Q1 deck scandal, including an analyst who mirrored version histories and had the receipts. That line? Claire's favorite. They even included a grainy photo of Nigel leaving our building, escorted, mid-rant, shirt slightly untucked, face contorted. The image had clearly been taken by someone inside the office. It went viral by noon. His LinkedIn went dark by 2. By 3:30, the group chat from our strategy team was flooded with screenshots of Slack messages he'd once sent. The ones with the fake flattery. The circle-back gaslights. One read. Don't get emotional about ideas, especially if they weren't yours to begin with. The irony was its own kind of justice. But the final nail came not from the company. It came from the courthouse. After his termination, Nigel tried one last move, a direct message to Claire. A long, rambling wall of text that started with faux concern and spiraled into obsession. You were never safe with him. You know I could have given you more. I saw the way you looked at me that night, don't lie to yourself. He followed it with a forwarded photo from a restaurant we'd been at the week before, taken from across the room. That was the last straw. Claire didn't hesitate. She forwarded the message to our attorney, the same one who'd quietly advised us during the internal investigation. Within 48 hours, legal had the paperwork filed. By the end of the week, we had a restraining order in hand, and confirmation he'd violated 3 internal ethics codes and California labor laws. The best part? That Business Cipher article got an update a few days later. Update: the former executive has since been issued a restraining order following multiple documented attempts to contact the fiancée of a former colleague. A company spokesperson declined to comment. He lost his job. He lost his reputation. And he lost the last illusion that anyone, especially Claire, would ever want him back. 2 days after the article, I got an email. Short. Polite. Subject: inquiry, speaking opportunity. Body: would you be open to speaking on ethical leadership failures for our upcoming panel at the Midwest Strategy Conference? Your story has resonated with a lot of folks in the industry. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed the laptop, poured a drink, and walked out to the balcony where Claire was watching the sunset. She looked over and smiled. Someone else asking for the story? I nodded. This time, they want the truth. She clinked her glass against mine. Then tell it. Because Nigel didn't just lose his job. He lost the narrative. And from now on, every time someone Googles his name, my story comes up first.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.